Welcome back to Activism Uncensored. Today we have Harry from Greenpeace. Why don't you tell us a bit about yourself and what you've been doing for the last few years in the climate movement?
Hey Josh, thanks for having me on. I started, my first kind of like interest in the climate movement as it is now started in early 2019. I was kind of like following Extinction Rebellion, a little bit before the April massive protest in 2019. I saw it on the news.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was like Dame Emma Thompson with the pink boat. It came up on BBC News, and I was like, "Oh, that's really interesting. Like, there's something really important going on here." So I went. I went with my partner, and it was this amazing kind of like festival of people coming out, beautiful weather. I'd not really seen anything like that before. In my experience, like outside of music festivals, and it was just this feeling that things needed to change, and we all knew that at the time, and obviously still do now. But it was this feeling that people could get together, and you could put a massive pink boat in the middle of Oxford Street, and you could do a march all the way down to Marble Arch with tens of thousands of people. And it just really captured my spirit and my imagination. I came back the next day, helped out with some screen printing for T-shirts. And just thought this is really special and I want to be involved. So a few days after that, I quit my job. I quit my job. I used to work in kind of like the music and events industry. So doing kind of like sound and video recording and technician, that kind of thing. Which is kind of interesting because I was like doing these corporate events, these like multi-million pound corporate events, kind of serving to the corporate masters. And I was just getting so sick of it. So this kind of like new feeling that I had was really inspiring. Saw Greenpeace were advertising for fundraisers. People to go door to door talking about, climate, about various different issues, plastics, deforestation, all these different issues, going door to door and trying to get people on board with what they were doing. And I thought, you know what, let's just give it a go. Let's try it.
So you've been working. You told me before we started that you've been working for Greenpeace for a number of years now. How long have you been working there for?
For 4 years, yeah. So, I think I started a couple of weeks after that Extinction Rebellion April protest in 2019, I really enjoyed fundraising. The cool thing about fundraising is like you're going door to door. Obviously you want to speak about what Greenpeace is doing and, the kind of campaigns and all that and getting people to sign up to become supporters of Greenpeace. But at the same time, for me, it was like this big kind of social experiment where, part of the fun and the joy of that is like you get to listen to what other people think. And it really kind of like molded my view of things as well.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Ask you a question. So you spoke to, I imagine, thousands of different members of the public going door to door. You must have really got a good insight as to what the area you was doing, what they thought about climate. So, first of all, what region was he doing that in, and what do you think was the general perspective of the climate?
Yeah, that's a great question. So primarily London, so north and south, west, east, kind of all around London. But I would also go to Brighton, to Cambridge, went to Edinburgh for a week, Bristol, lots of different areas. And, obviously they're quite urbanised, areas. We would go to cities where, typically speaking, people would be more kind of interested in talking about climate and talking about the environment. But yeah, I mean, it varies so much that, like, if I gave you an answer, it might not be representative of the whole. But the interesting thing is, obviously in 2019, you know, this was like the height of the kind of disdain of Brexit, and obviously that election in December 2019 where Boris Johnson got elected, and you know, like from where we are now to then, that's 4 years. Like, there's been such a shift. You get less people denying climate change or even any environmental issue.
Are you sure? I mean,
in the areas where I was working.
I've been working in construction. I worked a lot in construction. So I saw, when I bring up climate, the majority, I hear a lot of it's a cycle and it's natural, and I'm just there like, you don't know what you're talking about. That's been my experience talking with the general public most of the time anyway. And the ones who do actually agree and think, okay, there's a climate crisis, then they could say, well, there's nothing you can do about it anyway. So it feels like it's a double, you know. So first I've got to convince you that there's a climate crisis, and then I've got to convince you that we can do something about it. So it's kind of a double barrel thing.
It's, you know, that and you know, I mean, there are fundraisers who work in that team who could kind of give TED Talks about how to overcome people's objections, you know.
I could do one of those.
Because there's so many, you know, like there's so many different objections that people can give. Is it all right on your end?
I'll tell you what.
Signal's dropping.
Yeah, it's okay. Look, it's okay. The good thing about the signal dropping is because we're recording the audio on both ends, we're going to have crisp, clear audio no matter what happens. So don't worry about the signal. The signal just covers the video. Interesting you say that, actually, because I'd like to, if after this interview, podcast episode, you've got any friends that want to come on, you can just forward me their number and ask them if they want to be on the show. Yeah. But yeah, I've gotten pretty good at like giving, explaining most people's questions about the climate. But there's some people, for example, believe the Earth is flat, and once you get to that level of like, you know, what it's kind of like impossible to change their minds. They're going to get that far gone, personally.
Yeah, well, that's it. You know, you have to kind of decide. You know, obviously we've all got only a limited amount of time in our day, you know, and if you're at kind of an event or a protest where you could potentially be speaking to hundreds of people, having really, you know, in-depth conversations, you know, the interesting thing as a fundraiser is it's kind of the same. You only have a certain amount of time that you're going out and doing it, so you have to kind of think, well, you know, you try, but is the person just sort of trying to wind you up, or are they, you know, actually willing to have a conversation? Conversation is a two-way thing, right? So it's okay if people believe a certain thing, but you know, the ideal conversation would be like, are they going to sort of like consider your point of view as well? You know, and as you described, some people don't, so it becomes frustrating, you know. But that's kind of where you've got to be like, okay, well, that person is just not quite ready yet to have this conversation. You move on to the next person and kind of go that way. But yeah, I mean, it's, you know, how do you convince people that won't be convinced? It's an amazing question. I don't know the answer, even after 4 years of fundraising.
Can I just add in? You know, I got a call from Greenpeace, probably 3 years ago, to be honest, and I was just getting into civil resistance. I think I'd just been arrested a couple of times with XR, and I was just about to start Insulate Britain, and I got a call from Greenpeace asking me to donate £3 a month, and I see the climate movement. I see it's there's like a bit of a spectrum going on. Like at one end you've got the people hunger striking till death, and at the other end you've got Greenpeace. And I think you've got all these different groups that fit in all these different slots. I'd say like like XR would be a step up from Greenpeace, and JSO would be a step up from XR, and then God knows where that's going to go next. But the point I was making is I'm quite a strong believer in like mass civil disobedience, mass civil participation. It's like literally not planning the march, not telling the police where you're going to go, and literally just going, doing it, and shutting it down, and bringing it to a standstill. That's more where I kind of lie with my side of the protesting. I want to maybe hear from you how you think, with the time scales we've got with the climate crisis, to actually stop the major tipping points like the Siberian, the melts, the melting, the permafrost leaking, deforestation, the tipping points. How do you see organisations like Greenpeace being part of that solution, being able to stop those tipping points in that short time frame that we've actually got?
Yeah, I think in the movement itself, in the environmental movement, there's so many different organisations that do things in so many different ways. And like if you're sort of talking about scale, obviously there's ones beyond Greenpeace who are more involved in the corporate world. You've got Client Earth who are involved in the legal side of things. There's so many different organisations who do amazing work and just do it in very different ways. And the interesting thing about Greenpeace is, it started in 1971. It's over 50 years. That sort of brand in itself has been going. And like Greenpeace was seen as kind of like on that end, of like breaking the law, activism. And the really interesting thing since I've been involved and probably before that as well, is obviously XR have come along, JSO, Insulate Britain, all of these all these groups, new groups doing like really pushing that side of things in a completely different way. And I think it's great, I think it's what is needed. I think it's what is needed, but I think at the same time it's important to recognise lots of different organisations just do things differently. And massive civil disobedience is obviously what that side of things are doing, what JSO and XR, etc. are doing. But, on Greenpeace's side, the tactics are different. The vision is similar, the objectives are similar, but the actual tactics are just slightly different in that, Greenpeace will go sort of directly to a corporation or directly to, whoever the kind of the target may be, and sort of bypass the public in that way, and just go straight to the source. And, that's just the style of the tactic it is. And I don't think it's any more than that. Obviously beyond that, you've got like lots of lobbying and lots of lobbying MPs and lobbying corporations kind of that way as well. But the thing I really like about Greenpeace, go on.
So I understand it's going through those channels where you try to lobby and influence corporations, but in my opinion, the only thing that really influences corporations is the baseline, the profit margins of that corporation. Like, that's like their number one concern over anything you guys say to them. Yeah, I'm not trying not to like like shit on Greenpeace or anything like that, but I'm trying to, I don't know, understand, like, in my mind, the situation is so dire and so needs, like, kind of like an explosive change that's never been seen before in the history of humanity. Like, let's put it straight up, and I think that's going to involve us doing things that we've never done before, at least in this century. I don't know. I don't have all the answers, to be honest. Yeah.
Well, one thing we might be able to agree on is, like history shows, you don't have to look far. that you need the people on your side. You know, you need people power behind you in order to
That's
create.
true.
You know, like, I mean, the sort of theory of, you know, it's like the critical mass of people, or, you know, like there's lots of different sort of ways of expressing that. But the main thing is, like, I think you need a diverse movement to actually capture different sort of worldviews of people. You know, people have different worldviews. Some people think that direct action is absolutely the way to go. Some people don't agree with it or don't agree with the tactics. Either way, those sort of two groups of people might still really care passionately about the environment. And the question is, like, how do you inspire those people to, you know, take action in their everyday lives to come out and do something, whether it's direct action or whether it's having a conversation like we're doing, and, you know, like, that's where I think the environmental movement has improved and is getting better. For example, right, you know, you don't see Shell and BP having a go at each other, or kind of like, you know, wishing that they would do other things. So, and I think that a lot of work's going on at the moment, and has been, about kind of bringing groups together. Hence, you know,
that's very important.
Yeah,
I know there's been a lot of work done. There's been a lot of work on that in London,
right.
at the big one. I would have been in the big one, but I'm currently on tag right now. I'm on a GPS tag, and I can't come to London. You know, I've got to stay in either Manchester or Lancashire. But about, like, the group building and, like, coming together, that's very important, because like you said, a diverse movement it's like a diverse ecosystem. It's stronger. You know, if the government attacks one part of it really hard, the rest of it is still going strong. I think, well, JSO has recruited, Just Stop Oil recruited over 1,000 people in London at the big one to take action. Like, those people probably got recruited straight out of Greenpeace and straight out of Extinction Rebellion. So I think these organisations are kind of work together like a body in a way. Like, organisations like Extinction Rebellion, who are doing a big push to get numbers and people for non-disruptive protest. Those people are then there. They're already kind of in that mind frame when Just Stop Oil are recruiting straight in the same space. You know.
Yeah, I think it's important. Yeah, I think it's really, really important. You know, like, groups coming together, and you know, I viewed the big one as a really big success. You know, from the way it just kind of, like, works, but also, like, the feeling of it. And, you know, I'm really sorry that you couldn't come, and, you know, hey, well, ankle tags for protesters, that's a conversation in itself, isn't it? Especially with what happened on the weekend with the coronation. But you know, like, the feeling at the big one was very much kind of unity. That's what I felt. And, you know, that's a great feeling, especially, you know, given how things have been, you know, in the movement, and kind of small clashes and things like that. And like, I feel like we're into, like, this new kind of phase where groups are coming together, recognising that we do things differently, and thinking about how can we work together, because this is obviously, like, the greatest threat that we've ever seen. You know, but also, like, we're not winning. You know, we're not winning. So as you said, like, there's so much change that needs to happen in order for us to kind of make the changes, put the solutions in place that are needed, of which there are thousands. You know.
Can I just pick your head right now? I know it's a very difficult question, but if you was to name 5 things to change, say if you was put into power, and you all of a sudden became, like, the leader of the United Kingdom, and you had free reign over whatever you could want to do, what would be the first 5? I know you could be there for an hour now telling me what you'd do, but what would be the first 5 things that you'd do?
First 5 things. I mean, the first one that comes to mind is energy. You know, I mean, okay, so it's about 85% of UK households use gas boilers, right?
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily the fault of the people who have. I have a gas boiler, you know, like it's so
Yeah.
expensive to put a heat pump in. It's so expensive to have solar panels installed. The alternatives are out of many people's price ranges. People who are struggling to pay their energy bills anyway because of our dependence on gas and fossil fuels. So, you know, this is, in my view, this is where the government needs to step in and, you know, actually help people. And obviously that comes with insulation, that comes with, you know, lots of different sort of solutions. But the main thing is kind of like actually getting off gas and fossil fuels. And obviously I would also put in there stopping the sale of licenses in the North Sea, you know, which is crazy. So energy in general, you know, I'd probably group that all together as the first thing.
Can I give you an idea that I've been thinking about, because I've been thinking about this answer to the UK's energy problem. You think about this, right? We're an island, and the tides around the island rise and fall by several meters 4 times a day. There's also been I don't know much about this, so I shouldn't really be talking about it, but I heard there was a new concrete developed that used carbon dioxide as an ingredient to build the concrete, which makes that that concrete carbon negative. So we should be building with only that concrete and nothing else for the entire world from now on, like starting tomorrow. But besides that, imagine if we built these let's be eco-friendly, let's be like environmentally friendly, but dams going out into the ocean to create a box like miles wide. Maybe you could build like a dam around like the wind turbines out at sea. So when the tide goes out, it leads the water inside several meters higher than the water on the outside, and then through the water change, like going through like turbines to harness that power, you could produce power 24/7, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. You know, the tide never stops. And we've got a lot of energy around the coast that we could use for that.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I mean, we need more alternative energy solutions put in place. I mean, wind power is significantly increased. I think last year was the highest. I forget the exact stat, but it was over 20% of the power generated in the UK was from wind specifically. But more sources of renewable energy needs to be put in there as well, and you know that would also come with. I mean, there's currently prohibition on onshore wind, or it's very controlled. You know, you can't just throw up an onshore wind farm. So I think we need to be having a good look at that as well. But yeah, I mean, you know, energy in general. Like, I think we need to, we need to be getting creative about this, and we need to, as you said, try and think of new solutions. But it's a massive problem. You know, it's like. It's not something that's going to be solved overnight, but I think more needs to be done right now.
Can I say I think the problem really it's more of a political will problem than an actual physically possible problem. Now imagine, you know, when this country entered into World War II, the country basically turned all of its resources onto one problem, which was fighting and beating the Nazis. And every man, woman, and child had within the entire economy was doing towards that goal. You know, the women were in the factories and were building, making things, and the men went to war, and the men that couldn't go to war were still making things. You know, and you had towns like getting money together to pay for more Spitfires and pay for more equipment and stuff. So they had the entire country in one. I think. If we had mobilised the entire world on a scale of which we saw at World War II, you know, America mobilised an unbelievable amount of resources to build the largest navy in the world, to build the largest army in the world to fight Japan. Like, if we mobilise that scale of resources and people, not just for the Western world, but for the entire planet, like if we had, say, a new step in leadership that just came along and said, right, people, it's fight for your lifetime. So we're gonna do this as one planet. We'd have to divert a lot of resources to the third world, and we'd have to start the largest global infrastructure project that mankind has ever witnessed in the history of mankind. We would have to do this new carbon negative concrete. We'd have to up the production of that by like a millionfold, and then build like endless amounts of wind turbines. And well, wind turbines aren't even that great because the way they're made right now, I don't think they're even recyclable. So we need to be looking into projects where the materials can be completely recycled and reused. There's a lot to do anyway. It's
There
a
certainly
Herculean
is.
task.
Yeah, there certainly
Yeah,
is. And what you're talking about kind of revolutionizing the mobilization of people. That's where campaigning organizations are so important, to capture the imagination of people, and to try and like tell a story to people in a way that is that inspires passion and evokes passion, but also imagination as well. And I think that's where like looking towards the solutions with environmental campaigning is so important, because like naturally, as I said, I've spoken to I mean tens of thousands of people about the environment in general. People want one solution, and unfortunately there isn't one solution. There's going to have to be thousands, for all of these different problems, because it's obviously it's not just climate change. There are many environmental problems that need our attention, and that need rapid change. How do you do that? I don't know. We're figuring it out, aren't we? But it needs to happen now. It needs to happen yesterday. Yeah. But that's where I think direct action is so important. It's where I think non-violent action is, a powerful tool in environmental campaigning. Yeah.
yeah, it is. Guess what? I want to ask you a question. The next a generation that's say who are going to be born, like say I don't know, babies being who are toddlers right now, right? By the time they're our age, like in the 20s or the 30s, they're going to look back at this time. They will look back at this time. The early 20s when people like me and you were fighting, and we're either going to the question is, like, if we fail them, do you think they'll be able to look back and forgive our generation that had all the information and still allowed the living world to die effectively?
That is something I think about. Is part of me thinks that, well, people look back and sort of think, well, look at what they've done, look at what they did, look at the actions that got taken. Or will they look back and think, is what they're doing, was what they were doing enough? And I think for me, the most productive way of channeling that kind of, I guess, anxiety is to use it as fuel to keep going, to keep, to keep going and put that extra bit into everything that I do, and it is genuinely something I think about a lot. What will people in the future say? I don't have an answer for you, but I mean, that's up to us, isn't it? That's up to the people of now to write that history.
Well, I feel like we're writing that history right now. I feel like, especially like, there's people I know within the climate movement, within Just Stop Oil, and people. There's been murmurs about creating the next more radical thing. I've heard, I'm not going to mention names or what I've heard, just, murmurs about another step. And I think, like, these people are on the forefront of creating history. Like, Roger Hallam, for example, right? I know he's not a very popular figure in Extinction Rebellion anymore, but you cannot deny that he has had a pivotal role in human history with the actions that he's taken and the things that have outcome from his, and lots of other people. lots of other people as well have had a massive effect on human history. And I feel like everything we're doing right now in the climate movement is having a big effect on history. And like Phoebe, for example, on the just threw the soup on the painting, that action went viral in Japan. That action got hundreds of millions of views, like for a nation, as now considering her words. So like we don't know how far the ripples of these actions will go, but I feel like the more outrageous the thing that you do, the bigger the waves you make, even if you do get a lot of hate, to be honest. But it's a difficult one, really. And just back to what we were saying before about future generations, I would regularly ask myself, would I be able to stand in front of them, say in my 50s or 60s, and say to them, I really and absolutely tried everything within my power. I did absolutely everything and tried absolutely everything, and I gave it absolutely everything that I had. And that is a question that has driven me to do most of the things that I've done.
Yeah, and it's an interesting one because you can look back at the history of direct action and see lots of different tactics and what worked and what didn't, and for me so long as it's guided by principles of non-violence, then okay, I'll give you an example, right? Insulate Britain, right, of which you were a part of, right? So Insulate Britain obviously got an incredible amount of hate, like I've not seen that. I'd never seen it like that, before. But for me at the time, I was thinking, hold on a minute, like these people, they're doing the kind of the simplest form of protest there is, which is sitting in a road, right? And that goes back a long way of that tactic of protest. And I'm thinking, they're getting in the news every single day for months, in the news. And the beauty of that is the name of the group is the objective of the campaign, Insulate Britain. It took a very unsexy, to a lot of people, just like uninteresting subject, and created emotion. Whether that emotion was hatred or that emotion was passion or joy or whatever, seeing people block the roads in that way, it created emotion. And emotion is a way of channeling energy into change. That's what I think. Now look, I mean, it was only a few months after that now everyone's talking about insulation, and I think that it's been one of the most successful environmental campaigns that I've seen, and that's the beauty of it. The simplest form of protest, the sort of most traditional form of protest, if you will, getting that kind of exposure. I mean, it's like it's applauded.
We're all paying our price now, though. All the Insulated Britain people are going through court, going to prison. I was arrested 13 times. I've got court cases coming up. But the beautiful thing about all that was, birthed out of say 140 people. There was only 140 people involved in the entire campaign from start to finish. Out of that organisation was born Just Stop Oil. And 12 months later, I was in prison 12 months later in October, and I was speaking to people on the outside, and they had over 1,000 people in Just Stop Oil. So we're going from roughly about 100 to roughly about 1,000 in 12 months. That's a tenfold increase in 12 months. Blows my mind, that we can do that. I've had an idea, people either don't understand the climate, are not really sure about the climate, but what if we imagine if, like, instead of blocking the roads in Insulated Britain, we block the road saying fund the NHS on the banners. You might end up getting millions of people sitting in motorways funding the NHS if you're using that same kind of... Imagine if we replaced the word Insulated Britain with fund the NHS and change the goals. It wouldn't... Obviously, it's not helping with climate, but you'd get millions of... I reckon you'd get a lot of people into you know, a lot more people would be willing to sit on the M25 if it is for funding NHS.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is like incredibly brave people who are willing to sacrifice liberty and freedom to do that. And like I think anyone that gets involved, regardless of the topic or campaign topic, in non-violent direct action just needs to be applauded, because I mean, well, I'm myself an activist, and understand the kind of anxieties, but also the sense of the sense of kind of like, I'm out here doing something. It's a very special feeling. But yeah, I mean, the NHS, obviously, there's so many topics, there's so many areas which our government are failing us on.
Yeah.
And
almost every area. Let's be real.
Right.
Almost every area.
Yeah. It needs change. And like on that topic, something I'd like to talk to you about is what happened on this weekend. So obviously the king was coronated, and there was anti-monarchy protests, as well as Just Stop Oil, I think, were present, and they arrested over 60 people for what we're not quite sure of.
They just arrested them straight up. It's not going to be able to hold up in court. They're probably not going to be able to charge them for anything. It's just they wanted them off the streets at that time. Like, they didn't want there to be seen to be a protest on TV or in the media, or for the world, because the world was watching, really. So I think what's happened there is someone in the government who's in charge, someone in the Home Office or somebody, maybe the Secret Service or whoever it is, MI5, just stepped forward to the police and went, clear them. Not today. Clear them. Just for today, clear them. We'll deal with it later. We'll deal with whatever comes of it later on. They're just not incidental.
This is the scary thing, and it's, for me, it's about accountability. And if we've got the leaders of our country getting away with things that like the public, even in the newspapers, even in the media, are saying are just like not on and not okay. If our leaders are getting away with things, whether it's parties, whether it's the sale of licenses in the North Sea, that's going to trickle down. And there must have been a decision, as you said, to do that. They would have weighed up the risks of a media backlash or potential fines or anything like that, and they would have still said, let's still clear them, as you said. And that's such a huge problem, and it's so draconian, and it's like, where is the accountability? Who do we hold to account? Because okay, we can talk about the Metropolitan Police, but who are we talking about? Where is that decision made?
We don't know where that decision is made, though, really. Right. And there is no accountability, really. I mean, if MI5 choose to do something, how accountable are they to the public, really? I mean, I'm sure there probably are systems where if they break, they start killing innocent people, then obviously there will be something. But these government organisations and entities, take the CIA, for example. There's declassified CIA documents now that show that they've been overthrowing governments since the end of the Second World War. Really, they've been overthrowing governments around the world, and that's that's in their declassified information. So these government entities are getting up to God knows what. They're not really accountable. You're dreaming if you think they are accountable.
Yeah,
I wonder if they'll try and stop us. I wonder if they'll try and stop. If it comes down to where there's an uprising of people, do you reckon the MI5 and the government agencies would probably get involved to stop us, really, won't they? Undermine us, infiltrate us.
I have no idea. I don't know how the government operate like that. But even still, regardless of the government trying to intervene, the great thing about kind of where we are now, besides what the government are doing and the bills they're putting through to stop protests happening, is that people are still getting involved. You know, people are recognizing the need to change, the need for change. You know, and it kind of like full circle comes back round to how do you get people involved? Because we do need more people to come out and march. We do need more people to come out and take action. And that's the cool thing about podcasts like this. You know, people will listen, hopefully be inspired, hopefully want to get involved. And, you know, like so I was reading an article the other day, I think it was a Geldem article, and they were talking about action and what it means to be an activist. And, you know, like, I found myself agreeing with so many of their points in that you can be an activist and not necessarily get arrested or not necessarily break the law or do those things, you know. But like part of being an activist is it's a way of life, and it's a way of kind of like living your values, having conversations, taking action in more ways than blocking roads, or in more ways than you know, what we see sort of the sort of traditional activists doing. And I think that's also a really important key into growing the movement. It's like there's so much you can do to take action, and I think spreading the message that way as well could be more inclusive too. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, no, I do agree. Like, even if you're aware of the climate crisis, you're concerned about it, and you're talking to people and you're sharing about it and you're doing all those things. Yeah, you kind of that you can support in so many different ways. That's not arrestable. Like, there's a lot of different support roles you can get involved with. Like, say if you're good with spreadsheets and you're good with like, you know, dealing with people, or you're good with dealing with whatever, then there's definitely roles for you. There's roles for you in Extinction Rebellion, there's roles for you in Greenpeace, and there's roles for you in Just Stop Oil. Like, you know, something you made me think about though when you said that about, you know, I remember when I became concerned about the climate, and I was telling my friends about it, I was telling my parents about it, I was telling my co-workers about it, I was sharing about it on Facebook all the time. Every possible way I could express the climate crisis to everybody, I was trying my best. And nobody wanted to hear it. Like, most people, like, yeah. Nobody really wanted to hear it. And that really started to eat me up inside a bit, because I wasn't doing anything about it. And for two, nobody was listening to me about it. And I guess you do look at the normal ways of campaigning, but before I even started this, I'd looked at those and thought, you know, like Greenpeace, for example, they've been in existence for 50 years. The climate movement has been around for decades, and we've got years left. So whatever has got to be tried has got to be something that's new, something that's explosive, and something that's new. And but I really value bringing all the groups together into one big unifying movement. But yeah, it's really empowering to actually be fighting for this world, even in whichever way you can do it. So the way you do it, I imagine it's quite fulfilling, the work that you do. Because you're fighting for our world, really, aren't you? You think about it.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think we all are, you know, and like that's the thing. Is like, yeah, it's interesting your point about, you know, talking to family and friends, and because I had a very similar experience. You know, my family were very confused why I quit my job and started as a fundraiser. You know, like they were concerned and they were confused.
Yeah,
and they didn't quite get it until, I think until I did start taking action. You know, in the sense of non-violent direct action, and you know, it's always voluntary at Greenpeace, and I'm a volunteer activist. It's not necessarily part of my job, and I've done like quite a few sort of non-violent direct actions with them. You know, from like going to Tesco's headquarters, we had this campaign about industrial meat. You know, and and how the meat that Tesco are selling in their stores in the UK is linked with deforestation in the Amazon via the supply chain. Obviously, industrial meat being a key source of emissions all around the world. So we went to Tesco and I did a couple of protests at their headquarters up in sort of Hertfordshire. And I started taking action, got slowly into it, to the point where the last one I did was, we went to the Navigator Oil Terminal, which I know JSO were involved in as well, that particular terminal. And, this one was kind of tied in, obviously, with oil, but also with the war in Ukraine. And there was a shipment of £30 million of Russian diesel coming in to the Navigator Terminal. And we basically occupied it, and it turned around.
So what can I ask? What was that like? So I should have asked you this at the beginning if you've done any actions. But tell us a bit about that.
That one was I've done different actions with different sort of risk levels, if you will, of arrest, and from dressing up as Boris Johnson and going to Downing Street, that was great. But this one was. This one was kind of it was a different sort of league of action in that, obviously we knew the risks involved and, actually occupying an oil rig. But the kind of galvanizing feeling behind it was, this was back in May last year, where Russia had just invaded Ukraine in February. We were seeing reports every day about the war crimes that were being committed, and obviously the sense of we're going to an oil terminal and making that link as well, which wasn't necessarily clear at that time. What was it like? It was exciting. It was exciting, but also in some way daunting. For me, it was the first time I'd done a kind of an oil rig based action, or an oil terminal, I should say, based action. But yeah, it had a strong feeling of weight behind it, and that action resulted in a court case. There was 10 of us that got taken to court, and we actually won the case. So the judge agreed with us. Our defence was that we were stopping the funding of terrorism. And Judge and Magistrates Court in Essex agreed with that. And that felt somewhat historic in that it was the first time in a UK court that Russia had been seen as committing acts of terror, So yeah, at that point my parents were sort of like, okay, right, we're starting to get it, and now they'll sort of introduce me to people and they'll tell that story, and I come from the countryside in the West Midlands, where it's very blue, and they'll be introducing me to their mates, who would have voted for the current government, and telling that story and talking about action, and I just never would have even dreamed of that, before. So I think that's a good story of how you can convince people by your actions, obviously done in the right way and with the right kind of storytelling behind it as well. You can get people on board who you never thought would be, remotely into that. So yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting one. And I think the fact that we got vindicated in court was, sort of put the cherry on it.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Thanks,
that's. Well, can I ask? So your first action, right? What was it like the night before? When you,
yeah.
Tell that part of it.
Yeah, it's obviously the activists, NVDA trained. So you have training that you go through, and
non-violence training.
Yeah, exactly. Non-violent communication. All different kinds of things involved in taking action, and that obviously makes you sort of more calm more ready to take action. But
Mm.
the first one I did was at Tesco's headquarters, I think. And we sort of did a rebrand of the front of their headquarters. We sort of put branding up, Tesco equals industrial meat or Tesco equals deforestation. And we brought an ad van, so a van with like TV screens on the back with a message from an indigenous leader in Brazil, telling the heads
Wow.
of Tesco, like, this is what you're doing by selling this meat.
Wow.
And
Oh my God.
my role in that action was talking to as communicator, so talking to the staff at Tesco.
Hmm.
And yeah, the really interesting thing about that was a lot of the staff were on board. So it was quite nice, you know, and it was very low risk and felt quite nice. But the night before, obviously, you're sort of anticipating what could happen, what might go wrong. But then the strength that you
Yeah.
have in unity of like lots of people doing it together kind of definitely makes me feel more at ease about that at the time. What about yourself?
Oh. um. Well, I've told this story before in the podcast, but you know, the night before an action, you can get a bit like, oh shit, you know, like say for example, you're gonna go and break into an oil terminal, and you're gonna cut through the fences, and you're gonna hide from security guards, and you're gonna climb on things, and you're gonna go in the middle of the night as well. You can be you're kind of worrying about all the things that could happen, all the things that could go wrong. You could think for like, oh, you just kind of shit yourself a little bit, to be honest. But funny thing is, like, when you do enough of these actions, so I'm on 25 arrests now. Just to, when you do enough of these actions, you kind of like get used to it and get used to that feeling. I did a football stadium once that had 68,000 people in it, and the idea that I might be like me pitching, there might be a pitch invasion when I'm chained to the goalpost and then murdered by 68,000 people was quite a scary one. So after I was doing an oil terminal like a few months after that, and I was in the car just chilling like, oh, this is gonna be sweet. This is no, you know, this is nothing. But in the same car there were people who if that was their first action, and they're like, you know, imagine you get into a group of friends, and okay, we're now going to go break into an oil terminal at 4 a.m. We're going to be arrested for this. We're going to be taken by the police in handcuffs and then put into a police cell and maybe charged with an offence. We're going to do that all anyway, you know? Yeah, you've got to try your best to comfort those people in those times and reassure them that it will be okay, you know? And they're about to have the one of the best experiences of their entire lives. Pretty interesting as well. I actually kind of miss breaking into oil terminals. That was like quite fun. Yeah. I will not say that I've got any plans to do it in the future, but I'm just saying it is a very fun activity. Maybe try it out sometime. Yeah, that was kind of a long way of answering your question.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, great. Yeah, and I think, you know, like, that's the thing. Like, for people that are listening, you know, if it's something you want to do, you just got to try it. Like,
Yeah.
go to an MVDA training. You know, like there's so many going on. I mean, I know XR and JSO, and of course Greenpeace do them as well. And go and try it. You know, like, go and give it a go. And if it's something you're interested
At least
in,
do non-violence training. Like
exactly, yeah,
you can go do non-violence training and then just walk away. Like there's
yeah,
no
exactly.
commitment. It doesn't cost you anything. It's a free day, and you'll meet some cool people. To be honest, I think the people you meet doing this kind of stuff is the best part, really. Like, I've not got much experience with working in Greenpeace, but the people when you meet people on an action, you've got have found the bravery to stand up and be counted, then those are quite some extraordinary people, really, and it's worth doing it just for them, just to meet them. Like, if you like listening and you've not really got any direction with your life, you know, you've got a job, you pay your bills, you just take it along with your life, and you feel like there needs to be something more, then this, I think, is it, because we're in an planetary emergency now. Like, your life and your children's lives are at stake, and we need to all stand up and be counted. And during that process, it is one hell of an adventure. It is one hell of an adventure. Like, and you know what, to say to you, like, in the last less than 2 years, 25 arrests have taken place. You know, all the things I've been up to, blocking roads, oil terminals, digging tunnels under roads, football matches, Formula One, prison. I wish I could go back to the beginning and just do that whole ride all the way over again from the beginning, because it was incredible. It was the greatest time of my entire life. The Insulate Britain campaign was fucking brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant. Like, being with the people and the thing is, it went on for like at least 2 months as well. So, like, you can imagine, after the first month, everybody who's like really drained and can't do it anymore has kind of stepped back, and you've just got the people who were just fucking like going for it. They've been going for 4 weeks. You get new people joining in as well, but you get so close to those people. Can you imagine how close you'd be with your block team if you're all living in a house together for like week after week after week after week after week after week, getting arrested every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday? You come home after an action on a Monday, or you get home on Tuesday, and you're buying someone's got a newspaper, and you'll all be putting the newspapers out like, oh yeah, we made that one, and then we'll go to the pub. It was a whale of a time. Yeah, I'd recommend it. I'm just gonna say a bit of a shout out. So, if all these action stuff sounds fun to you, do your non-violence training. Go to Just the Poil of doing the extreme stuff, and Extinction Rebellion are a little bit less extreme, and then you can do more community stuff with XR and Greenpeace and things like that. And there's a space for you in the movement. That's what I'm really trying to say. Wherever you are on the spectrum, there's a space for you in this movement. Definitely.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I like how you got the Indigenous leader on the advertisement van. That was a quite smooth one.
Yeah, like, and I think as well, like, that's like a really, really important thing that Greenpeace does, and part of the values of the campaigning is, like, you got people who are most affected by these issues, whether it's climate change, whether it's industrial meat, or whatever, deforestation, all these things, ocean destruction. There are people who are most affected in areas where more often they have the least amount of power to do something about it. And I think part of what Greenpeace is doing has been doing, and is platforming, allowing people to have a platform, or certainly, like, kind of being a megaphone for their own platform and channeling what they're saying through, kind of where Greenpeace is at in the movement. And I think it works, and I think it's a really important part of our work is allyship, and is kind of using Greenpeace's sort of power and leverage to amplify people, whether that's Indigenous leaders, whether that's kind of more grassroots groups in the movement. And Greenpeace does a lot of work to work with other groups and other organisations as well. And I think that's one of the cool things about it, But yeah, I mean, like, working with Indigenous people and Indigenous leaders is like a core fundamental value of what Greenpeace is doing too. Yeah, it's an interesting time, and it's an interesting time, and the kind of scope of it is, like, so massive. But I mean, recently we got that Global Ocean Treaty agreed. Do you hear about that in the news?
No, can you tell? I've heard a bit about this. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, sure. So, I've been talking about this campaign for my whole time at Greenpeace, because it launched when I joined, basically. And the idea is to via the United Nations, have countries or world leaders agreeing to protect 30% of the world's oceans by 2030. And it's about international waters. So international waters not belonging to any nation. It's like a global commons, which is obviously has created huge problems if there's no ownership. You get corporations coming in and coming through as super trawlers, or trying to start deep sea mining as an industry. There's all kinds of problems. Oil drilling in global oceans where there's no country regulating it. So the idea of this treaty is to have countries via the United Nations come together to agree to actually regulate it. And getting countries to agree to something, I mean, right now was no mean feat, and I think it was touch and go at a lot of points. It went through 5 rounds of negotiations over a number of years, but they actually agreed it. They agreed it, and it's been signed. I think the next steps with it now, countries are kind of adopting the treaty into their own legal frameworks, and then they have to actually roll out the 30% of protection across the global oceans. By the way, less than 1% is protected right now. So that's a big
Wow.
jump in ocean protection. And then obviously you have the enforcement of that. It's making sure that, for example, super trawlers don't go in and drag their mile-long nets in these areas to catch fish. But yeah, I think it kind of shows an interesting scope of what Greenpeace can achieve from having kind of like 50 offices around the world, all campaigning on the same thing, while at the same time,
that then, actually.
yeah, I think so. Yeah, and at the same time, like playing a part in the climate movement in the UK, and that's one of the interesting things about Greenpeace is that because it's been going for such a long time, it has a different kind of way, as we were talking about before. So yeah, that's been an important campaign for me personally, because I've been talking about it for a long time.
Yeah, wow.
It's a fundraiser.
That's mega. That 30%.
Yeah,
So 30% of international waters.
Right. Yeah. So that still needs to be kind of worked out and implemented. So that's going to be the next probably like 4 or 5 years of work, is actually getting those sort of ocean sanctuaries, highly marine protected areas actually put into place. But the treaty itself is a way of implementing those things.
Are there any countries that you know of that are trying to undermine this work?
Well, they've all actually agreed to it now, and I know that there were fishing nations, who were objecting to the treaty. But then, think about it like this: if you as a nation are like relying on the ocean for fish as like a key source of income, surely you want to protect the fish. Surely you want to protect that. From that point of view.
What if your nation is profiting from overfishing those areas, and in the short term, your fishing of those areas will be decreased. But then the fish population will thrive, obviously, and fish populations will actually increase. So, I guess you've got to have a bit of you can't. Countries can be and corporations can be very short-sighted, really.
Right, and that's the tragedy of the commons. That's the whole tragedy behind if you have an area that is unregulated, you have to try and get people to agree to actually look after it. And the kind of theory behind fish is that you have something called the spillover effect, where if you protect specific areas where fish populations thrive, they build up, and then they spill out into other areas that aren't necessarily protected in the same way. And it takes long-term thinking to achieve things like that. Like regardless of whether you eat fish or not, or anything, or if you sort of agree with fishing in itself, there's still 3 billion people around the world who rely on fish as their primary source of food, and that in itself is food security for like a third of the world. You know, so it's been such an important campaign to run, and it's been a pleasure to be a part of it. But there's still a lot of work to do. You know,
Mm.
but yeah, that's like I say, that's the cool thing about Greenpeace as well. Is like, you know, you've got lots of different areas in which Greenpeace will campaign. You know, sort of more on the biodiversity side, on the nature side, with ocean protection, with deforestation, and you know, but also with climate too. Yeah.
Yeah, I've never really known much about Greenpeace, to be honest. But that's quite interesting to know that they've got quite like a many things around the world. Now it's we really need to get everyone's we really need to work on this unity now. Like Just Stop Oil and Greenpeace, we need to work on unifying. You know, the people who are interested in Greenpeace need to be looking at Just Stop Oil, and vice versa. You know, people who hear about Just Stop Oil also need to be looking at Greenpeace, and you know, because you can fit it anywhere in the movement really. Um, we have been going now for just over an hour, so what we'll do is we'll give it another 5 minutes, and then we'll finish up. Is there
Cool.
anything? Is there anything that you really would like to have heard that you've not spoke about so far?
It's funny, I've been thinking, you know, as we've been talking, I've been thinking more about one of your questions of what are the 5 things that I would do if I was the leader of the country. You know, and I spoke about energy. We obviously spoke about, you know, obviously the public order bill and police crime sentencing courts, but you know, these bills that are coming through that, you know, like that are draconian in deterring protesters, or at least attempting to. So I think there's 2 things there that I'd change. But you know, it's a really interesting kind of thought, and interesting conversation. Is like, kind of what could be done. And I just kind of wanted to turn it back on you and to see, like, obviously we've mentioned 2 things.
Yeah.
Like, what else would you add to that?
First of all, so for a start, I'm going to implement everything on a gradual basis. So I wouldn't say like all subsidies for oil the industry ends today. I would say over the next 12 months it's going to go down, like every month your thing is going to go down, and by the end of the year it's going to be at 0, just to give the investors and the economy, it's not much time to adjust, but just so it's not like a cliff edge, it's more of like a ramp down to the bottom. So I'd do that for every industry. So first of all, I would want to get the people protected from the oil, because what the corporations will try and do is make the people suffer and try and blame you for it. So what you'd want to do first is nationalize. You're going to nationalize all the oil companies. You're just going to take them up like that, and you're going to nationalize the public transport and the beef industry, and you're just going to nationalize it all. Then then what you're going to do is so the beef industry, I'm pretty much going to end it like overnight, like pretty much like you're just going to stop producing all new beef, and as I would continue growing the grain that we use to feed the beef, the cows, to the point where we've now got a massive excess of corn, and I would turn that into healthy vegan foods, which would then be free to the population of the UK. So all that food that was going, all the meat subsidies that was going to producing beef is now going to producing free, organic, vegan food for the population. So food is now subsidised paid for by the government. Your energy bills will get slashed as well, so you can afford to heat your home and things like that. And we'll also be starting the largest infrastructure project in the history of mankind around the shores of the UK. So we'll be building out of sea dams. So I'd probably build these dams where, when the tide comes up, the tide come over the dam walls to allow the biodiversity and fish to move around the area. And it's only when the tide comes out past the dam wall that it starts producing power. So I'd start generating power from the oceans. Obviously protect a large amount of the oceans around the UK so they can't be fished. So that allowing the fish to build up in those areas and overspill into the areas where you can fish. Probably, I'd probably have a relook at HS2. Redesign that project. Then I would probably go on a wild. We've got to rewild the countryside of the UK. So once we don't need a lot of area to grow food for the cattle, we could probably reduce that area, start to rewild areas. And when we plant forests, I wouldn't just you don't do monoculture where you pick the same tree over and over again. You'd get some experts in. How do you actually build a real forest, a biodiverse, rich forest? You need like hundreds of different species of trees all mixed together, and you'd need them to take root and start growing. But then you'd have to start introducing fungi and mycelium networks and getting mushroom experts in to establish mushrooms growing in the forest, and reintroducing animals into like beavers and things like this, and different things. And this I could go on for hours. I could probably give you a list as long as my arm. But
that's the interesting thing, isn't it? Because there's obviously so many changes that need to be put into place, and the interesting thing is going to be, obviously, as next year there's going to be an election. How these things get put into place, I think, is the really interesting thing. Because based on the current state of things, it seems like there's going to be a new government. That might all change by next year, but let's see.
I think you're kidding yourself if you think it's going to change with the new government.
Well, no. I meant as in what the current polls are saying is that Labour are ahead by quite a long way, and I meant that might all change by next year. We don't know, but let's see what happens. But I certainly think that more can be done. More can be done. Whether it's obviously this government who seemingly aren't doing, much to the manifestos we're going to see coming out in the next year or so. But the big question is how a change is going to be made, and that's an interesting point.
I've just lost complete faith in our political system. I don't believe that. I don't believe that even if they write a manifesto saying they're going to do something, they don't actually have to do it when they get in power. They don't feel like they don't have to do anything they say they're going to promise to do. Politicians lie all the time. So, and the fact that we've got a two-party government, a two-party system, they both agree on 90% of most of the corporate interests. So in my opinion, it's an illusion of choice, really, our democracy. But that's an episode for another time, really.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we could talk for a long time about that.
Yeah, we could.
Yeah,
we could.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to observe, and it's obviously terrifying and frightening as well. But it's interesting to observe the political system and how things work and how things don't work. And to continue the discussions on, because that's how reforms are made. As well as action, as we discussed. But yeah, it's an interesting point. You're talking about the solutions that you put in place.
What do you think of my solutions that I put forward? The ones I
think they sound great. I think they sound great. I think, the question is, how do you get the buy-in from people? For really drastic changes that are needed. How do we get people to buy into that and to come on board? And by people, I don't just mean me and you who are activists and who are involved in the environmental movement. I mean your everyday person, who might not even think about politics or might not even think about the environment.
Get them thinking about what affects them personally, like
Right.
their energy bills, their food bills, their transport bills. You could bring them all, if you did what I suggested right there, you could bring those all right down. You could bring the food bills to zero. I mean, they wouldn't be able to go buy a burger at McDonald's anymore, but they'd be able to get free, healthy vegan food. So, I don't know, it swings and roundabouts. My brother won't be very happy. He likes eating steak.
Yeah.
One thing I was thinking is, you wouldn't completely end the animal. You wouldn't completely end the meat industry completely. You'd just reduce it by about 100 times. So like instead of a chicken costing £4, a chicken would cost 400 quid. So if you all want to chip together on Christmas and get a chicken, you can do, you know, but it's not like it's going to be a valuable thing that's been grown, you know, in a good way, in a sustainable way.
Yeah, I think you know, like the reduction of meat and dairy is like a lot more needs to happen in changing that system and actually reducing it from the consumer side as well. I think Greenpeace were campaigning on a 70% reduction in meat and dairy. I forget when the end date was for, but you know, like it is achievable, and I think you know a lot of it has to come from the government, but also you know we need to think about our choices and what we're doing and what we're eating. The difficult thing is when meat is so cheap. You know, you go to supermarkets and you see chicken for like £1. That is the worst kind of meat, the industrial meat that is causing that deforestation, or is certainly linked to that deforestation around the world via its supply chain. And that's when it becomes difficult, is the people that are eating that meat may very well be the people who are struggling to pay their bills. And you know, it's a difficult conversation, but it's definitely one that needs to be had and needs to be expanded on. And I think it should come from all sides, you know. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what. I'm gonna round the podcast up now. If there's anything you want to say, last thing you want to say?
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure. It's lovely to chat with you, and let's keep in touch. Let's keep in touch.
So the thing for this podcast basically is to allow people to explain their ideas and their meanings, and you know, really spend time to talk out their ideas and flush out their ideas and who they are as a person, which is where the value in the podcast comes from, in my opinion. So I'll finish up by saying, if you've liked this podcast, and hit a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. We've got a Patreon now, so we're trying to get we want to get some real microphones and some real cameras, because we're using mobile phones right now for everything. And is there any? Have you got a? Do you want to how can they get hold of you if they want to sign up for Greenpeace, or where can the listeners go to if they want to get involved with Greenpeace?
Yeah, so there's loads of different ways you can get involved. Obviously, like I got involved as a fundraiser. So if you're interested in doing that, we would love to have you. You know, there's also volunteer networks across the United Kingdom and Northern Ireland. So
you Google Greenpeace. Then
you can
on the
Google
Greenpeace website.
Greenpeace Greenwire, and then it will divert you to the website Greenwire, and then that's how you can find your local group. They'll meet up once a month usually, and discuss local campaigns, local environmental issues, as well as what Greenpeace are doing around the UK and around the world. But yeah, I really encourage you to get involved, you know, not just in Greenpeace, but in any way that you can in the environmental movement, and come and hear what people have to say, because there's so many voices, there's so many conversations, and unity is strength, I think, at the moment in the environmental movement and where we're going. We need more people on board with us. So get involved. Yeah.
And if you want to get involved with some spicy stuff, some more intense actions like oil I've talked about, then go to type in Just Stop Oil on Google and look up how you can get involved there. Right. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you later.